You are meeting a client or a prospective client, and they tell, I have this great idea. I want this video to go viral. What do you tell them?
I can pretty quickly tell them whether there's any chance of it going viral or not. Here are the steps, things that we know and we've learned over the years that your audience will relate to. We try to put that to one side, because if you break that down into what viral means, number one, number two, it's and number three.
Welcome to Ride Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. In the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. On today's episode of Ride to Success, we have an exciting guest, Stu Thomson, former World Cup mountain biker racer turned filmmaker and entrepreneur. As the founder and CEO of Cut Media, Stu has built a powerhouse creative agency known for producing viral content with top athletes and global brands like Red Bull, Santa Cruz Bicycles, and even working with stars like Danny McCaskill, Lewis Hamilton, Geraint Thomas, and Max Verstappen. From his journey as a professional athlete to becoming a leader in the world of sports media, Stu's story is all about passion, creativity, and the drive to constantly push boundaries. If you don't know who he is, you are in the right place. You will finally get to meet a legend. If you already know him, you know that Stu Thomson is not shy of appearing on podcasts. To that matter, he has appeared in bigger podcasts, much bigger than my little one here. But what differentiates from others is that I ask the questions that other podcasts don't want to ask or don't dare to ask. So I go into the athlete to business transition, the creative problem solving under limitations that Stu finds on a daily basis, the organic growth that Cut Media has been going on, the athlete collaboration in filmmaking, and last but not least, and probably the most important topic of all in our conversation, mentorship. Now, these specific topics offer deeper practical insights that were never mentioned in other podcasts that Stu has been part of. Now, this is why you need to be listening to Ride to Success. This is the podcast that asks the questions that other podcasts are not asking, the questions that you want to hear about. So get ready for an inspiring conversation. Welcome, Stu, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Pedro. It's great to be here. I feel like we've been talking about this for a little while, so it's good to make it happen.
Yeah, we have, but as these things go, it takes a bit of time to get things agreed and find a time that is convenient for both of us.
Sure.
I mean, I wanted to really start because you are one of the few people that has been an athlete competing at World Cups, a filmmaker, a successful one, a founder working at the same company that you founded 13 years ago, as a CEO. So that's that puts you in a very select group of people that have been able to kind of have this trajectory. And it kind of begs the question for me, thinking about kind of your journey. What inspires you and what keeps you motivated?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting. I mean, it's the full, when you look back at the full journey, you're trying to think of the consistent things through that journey that I guess I apply or I've kind of learned. And I think, I mean, for sure, I like to think I'm a very driven person. Generally, I like to be busy. I like to be active. I like to be around good people as well. So I think that's also been part of it. But I think that for me, that it's it sounds sort of like cheesy, but I think it's like enjoying the journey. I think at every stage for me, it's definitely been about like thriving in the point I'm in and the environment I'm in that present kind of situation. And obviously there's been different challenges to it all the way, but I think it's kind of,
of course.
I'm always very motivated by the next challenge. And I think that's a common theme in like all the work I've done is like, I quite often will, do one thing and then like achieve it. And then I'm like, right, what's next? And it's not, I don't think there's like a massive like ambition to the whole thing, but I think it's an enjoyment of like that next challenge and that progression through the whole thing. And certainly at the start, I never had a big vision of where it was going to end up, but I think every kind of next step's been the enjoyable part. So
I think that's kind of kind of makes me reflect about the element of curiosity that is needed to be able to constantly seek new challenges, and also a little bit of perfectionist, perhaps. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there definitely is. It's definitely that. I think personally, it's probably mixed with an element of competitiveness as well, in that it's not necessarily with any particular person, but it's always, I think, competitive with myself to like, keep striving to be better and to do different things and to achieve new goals as well. So I think the curiosity is there and the ambition to keep doing different things and keep things fresh, I guess. I'm a competitive person, but I'm competitive with myself as well. So I definitely have that hunger to be, achieve, I guess.
Yeah, that comes across coming from mountain biking, downhill, competing at World Cups. You need that drive. You need that kind of mentality of, I want to succeed. I want to achieve this. And what can I do to improve or take to the next level? But we're going to touch upon like more the progression side of how this evolved, this journey. But looking back, there is a series of elements that I want to touch on, which is how have you grown personally and like over the years, from being single-minded focused as an athlete to now leading a team of over 25 people.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed. I definitely, I think everyone, they evolve and they grow and they change as they get older as well. So I've definitely evolved and changed. So I think there's definitely there's some things that I think there's some things that I'm a huge advocate for skills and abilities and things you learn as an athlete being applicable to the world of work or business or entrepreneurship or however you want to frame that. So I'm a big advocate for that. So there's definitely things you learn as an athlete which you apply through running a business. But I think for me, it's as I said earlier, partly that kind of striving to like the next challenge and the next thing and to grow. And then I think there's also a huge element of it for me that's been about like consistency as well. And that I'm quite I'm a driven person, but I'm quite like, I try never to get too high or too low. And I just like every day I kind of, get up and get on with it and like have, like whether it's writing and kind of working out and staying fit and still doing, still do various kind of types of writing and competitions and stuff, or it's at work as well. It's, just being quite consistent in my kind of like operation, if you like, day to day. And I think one of the, the old things that, everybody would always say as an athlete is the kind of thing about controlling the controllables and how you apply that in the world of work as well. And I think I definitely try and kind of reflect on that a lot and just, do everything you can, but also sometimes go, you can't control everything too.
You can't control everything. I mean, it's, is there any particular trait that you'd think, or you would say, this is what makes me keep fresh in my day-to-day?
Ooh, I don't know if it's a specific trait. I mean, I am, like I say, I am driven. I think it's that thing of like, I'm never, I'm not one of these people that takes a lie in the morning, like I like to get up and be busy and do things and everything. But I think also that consistency over the years is like, I'm definitely, I drive towards a goal, and I know in the days that I'm not operating my best, like I still give as much as I can and it still works out. So I do think I'm very good at not getting too high and too low with things, and like keep pushing and keep driving at different goals or aspects of what I'm trying to achieve. So I think it's probably that consistency matched with like the motivation that I have. I'm just a quite a motivated person, or I like to think I am anyway.
Yeah, I mean, does that come from your experience competing at the highest level in mountain biking? Is that a trait that you have acquired from that?
I don't think. I think the motivation maybe comes from before that, and I think it's
okay.
I think I've always been motivated, but I think what comes from the racing and the competitive side of my life is the ability to apply that motivation in a way that works, in a way that's structured, in a way that can work towards like a goal, if you like. And I think you learn that through being an athlete, through studying sport, through like even just being a sports fan. You start to like learn different ways that athletes will work towards like a bigger goal. I think that, as I say, that the way that applies to the world of work is there's so many parallels to that. And I think that's, I'm quite, as I say, I'm quite a big advocate for what athletes can achieve after the world of sport. And I think you quite often see so many athletes who, and it was the same for me, and it got forced on me, but I grew up, I wanted to race mountain bikes. It's all I wanted to do. It was all I ever thought about. And then you suddenly hit a point where that's not there anymore, and you have to refocus into something else. But I think that skill set that you learn through sport is really applicable in that circumstance. And I think you get a lot of athletes who are really lost after the world of sport and don't know what to do, or don't know, it's all they've ever known and they can't imagine doing something else. But I think when you manage to shift that focus to something else, and then suddenly you apply all that knowledge and all that skill set you've gained in sport and you apply it to something else, it's really powerful.
I mean, it does ring true about several aspects that you learn through being an athlete, through watching sports. So the dedication, the effort, the choices that you have to make, and all of those transferable skills, whether it is being an athlete, whether it is working a career that you reach a dead end, those, if you pivot, but you bring all of those skills together with you to a new business, to a new career, or you can take a lot of learnings with you and you can change that so that it becomes successful. And I guess you are one of the great examples of doing that. I mean, making the shift towards filmmaking, you start to pick up new skills. You already have a load of connections from the mountain biking community, and you can see the progress as you are learning these new skills, filmmaking, and then putting together these videos. And this is where you started MTB Cut at that time, and that's also at a very interesting point in the world, is a lot of macro factors happening. In 2005, YouTube had just started. Facebook had started roughly at the same time. So there is also the growing potential of having films streamed to the web, to YouTube. And so there seemed that there was a kind of a confluence of opportunity here, and you took it and you run with it. Was there a specific reason why you picked up a camera and started to film?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit both, I guess. It was there definitely wasn't like okay, internet videos blowing up and it's going to be this big thing, and there was definitely not like a grand vision to that. I think it was probably, it was late 2000, so 2007 that I started filmmaking a little bit more. And so during that time of racing and kind of competing, I used to spend a lot. One of the other riders I used to kind of ride with a lot and sort of train with, the two of us spent quite a lot of time. We'd go ride mountain bikes out of like our local dirt jumps, and we'd take photos and video, and like we'd always sort of been into it. And even in the culture of like watching the videos, and at the end of every season, you used to get like a VHS with like there was a series of mountain bike films called Sprung Video in the UK, which was they're kind of iconic in the mountain bike scene. But it was the thing, I would get one like every year and kind of love it and watch it. So it was definitely like and then there was a few people around me at the time when I started filmmaking who had sort of said like, oh, internet video is becoming a thing, and it's obviously an interesting place to be. But more than anything, I think for me, it was just I kind of enjoyed it. I could work with people, the athletes, so I already had access to some really, really good athletes to be filming. And also like there was a huge part of it, I think, on the technological side. Like as much as it was the internet video side of it was blowing up, it was actually the digitization, if you like, of the equipment as well. And I think it's one of the things, again, I'm quite an advocate for, is that filmmaking is really accessible. Because previous to that point, you really needed to train and understand it and understand the technology. Whereas at that point, it was when, okay, you can pick up a digital camera, go out, shoot something, come back, offload it onto your computer or play. It was mini DV I had first, which is play the little tape back on the computer, put it on the computer and edit. And suddenly, like I was in a place where I'd never studied film. I'd never been to college or uni to study it. I didn't really understand any of the technical side of it. but it was accessible, so I could get a camera and I could start filmmaking. So it was just, yeah, I mean, it was definitely a few things coming together at the time.
Yeah, it's remarkable because it it makes me think about cycling itself as a metaphor, but riding bikes as a metaphor. You know, you pick up a bike and you start riding it, and you get better every time. You spend more time riding it. When you get more confident riding it, you start trying to do some tricks, do some jumps. You can increase very rapidly your level of skill as an exponential curve. I mean, from researching you and Cut Media, there seems to be a pivotal moment, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this was 12 years ago, roughly, give or take. You created Imagine It.
I think with Imagine It, it was undoubtedly a massive moment for me personally as having that opportunity. But I think the way I look back on it is also like the way I embraced that opportunity and the way I learned from it as well is something I'm quite proud of. And I mean, to give you some context, what had happened by that point is, I'd started filmmaking. I'd been filmmaking for sort of 4 years up to that point, probably 3-4 years. Really just gradually kind of evolving it as a, my abilities, but also as a career. I started off working for some mostly some small cycling brands, distributors. I remember when I got Chain Reaction Cycles as a big client. Was probably my first major client, if you like, and working with some of their team. And I've been working with various athletes and along the way. But then when Imagine It came along, so I'd met Danny McCaskill probably 5 years. I'd met Danny when I was still competing as a rider.
Okay, right.
And we'd sort of become good friends, and I'd worked with him a few times filming. And in 2011, I made a short film with him called Industrial Revolutions.
Yes,
which was on a Channel 4 documentary in the UK. It was part of like the documentary almost followed the process of us making it, along with some other filmmakers and athletes in the same show. But then it went online as a short film, and that was like I guess one of the projects I look back on now and I'm like super proud of. It was a very, very simple, very me and Danny and a friend kind of stayed in a travel lodge room for a week, and we found this like really cool like old train yard and made this film that it's basically just like quite a pure kind of film of Danny on a trials bike exploring an old train yard and riding over the different obstacles and things in there and different trains and stuff like that. So it's quite a simple film, but after that film, Danny was a Red Bull athlete, and he kind of approached me and he said, Red Bull want to do like a massive project with me, and as it transpired, it was basically in 2012 that was, and it was Red Bull's biggest project internationally of that year. It was, an extremely expensive project, a big investment for them, and they wanted to put out, make this huge kind of project with Danny. And Danny kind of approached me about it and spoke to me about it, and it was like, I really want you to do it. And I think the thing that's worth knowing at that point is really until that point I'd worked for a few little cycling brands with a few little kind of projects, and this was like, one of the world's biggest brands and their biggest kind of campaign of the year, and what comes with that is, a client that has multiple vested people involved in it, a big investment. It ended up being the way it worked out. The whole concept was around kind of Danny's like vision of riding as if he was like when he was a child and he used to play with a toy bike on his bedroom floor. So we basically created this bedroom floor with all these massive toys, and as if Danny was kind of small, basically all these massive toys. And it was a 6-month-long project, and a lot of people involved, a lot of different parties involved, and a lot of pressure essentially on everybody. I mean, including Danny. And I look back on it, I'm like, well, first of all, Danny was adamant he wanted me to do it, even though I was massively inexperienced to do a project like that at that time. Red Bull ended up putting their trust in me to do it as well, which I was hugely grateful for because they didn't have much reason to, other than like the work I'd made up to that point. It was a pivotal moment for me because I think I came out of that with a lot more experience and and just ability to feel like actually going from, like I say, like essentially filming mostly mountain bikes up on the hills around Scotland and around the UK and wherever, to suddenly doing a big commercial project was quite a transition and something I learned a lot from. And obviously the film, I shot and directed the project, the film, so it went on to be, it was Red Bull's biggest, at that point, it was their biggest ever YouTube film. It was the biggest thing they did that year. They only got beat when they sent a man to space.
They had to send a man to space to beat the film.
But yeah, I mean, obviously a huge amount of it was Danny, his ability and his vision.
Yeah.
But we worked so closely together to bring the whole thing to life, and with a really good group of people as well.
Looking at the video now, he has over 90 million views on YouTube. I'm curious. You mentioned it was the biggest project. You said it was the biggest project for you, Red Bull, that year.
Yeah.
What was the brief that was given to you?
I don't think I ever got a brief. I don't think I ever got a brief. So it was quite, I guess it was very much, that one was definitely, it went through such a development, because actually with Red Bull, a lot of what they try to do is help their athletes bring something to life that they want to achieve, so it very much started off as like, Danny, what would you like to do if you could do a project? So there was a lot of different ideas bounced around, and we, from very, very early on, Danny was like, okay, I want to work with you on this. So we kind of ended up settling on a thing that was about him. It was actually around the kitchen table. He used to talk about his kitchen table and like pretending he was jumping from cup to cup or through the bowls and stuff like that. And that was the original idea. And actually the way it sort of worked was that we then made it the bedroom floor, and actually we almost pitched that back to Red Bull at that point. And I think they were like, okay, we sort of explained the idea, we kind of talked it back and forward, and then Red Bull were very, very involved, and then they're like, right, okay, we're thinking of this thing in like a bedroom floor, giant toys, we want to film it indoors. And then at that point you kind of build a director's treatment essentially, and a vision for what you see that project be, and then you pitch it back to them. So whilst most of the time we will get a brief from clients these days and everything, that one's quite, Red Bull are so involved, it was back and forth, and all parties kind of involved in the conversation.
Yeah, so this, I guess it involved a lot of trust, both Danny, on yourself, on Red Bull. How important is as a filmmaker, as a video agency, to really have the athlete, the talent in this case, lead the creative process? I
don't know about lead, is probably the wrong word, but I think it's
okay.
It's definitely involved, like very involved and as much as possible invested in it. I think, through every project we've made, and particularly through the learnings of Danny, I think there's two aspects to it. I think number one is that the athletes very much care about their sport, and they very much care about how they're portrayed. And I think you have to acknowledge that right at the very start. And I think the more you acknowledge that, and the more that you try to work with them, because ultimately an athlete is the expert in their sport. They are doing
exactly, yes.
They've seen it captured multiple times, and they also know their audience. So if you don't harness that expertise, then you're kind of letting yourself down. And I think it's something that, to be honest with you, in the world of like marketing, if you like, I think a lot of brands and agencies are kind of ignorant to, because I think the amount of times, particularly, I mean, the most experience, I guess, is the work I've had with Danny, because he was such a consistent relationship, worked with him for over so many years, and you would see like photographers, filmmakers, agencies coming in and be like, right, we want you to do this. And you're like, that's just crazy. Like that, for somebody who understands the sport or understands the athlete, or even understands his brand and the athlete's brand and how they want to be portrayed, it doesn't link up and it doesn't make sense. So I think as we've gone on as a company and evolved, and, we work with talent every day. We worked with so many different athletes, from likes of those Red Bull athletes, like Danny. We've worked with Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, Valentino Rossi. We're doing a project with Michael Johnson at the Olympics, and we work with all these different people, and I think when you walk into those conversations and you're like, I've got an idea of what we'd like to achieve, and we've got an idea of how to frame it in a creative way, but we really want your input and your expertise into this, and you open yourself up to that. I think you get a lot back from them. You get a lot of expertise and a lot of understanding in their energy. And and B, you get them invested in it, because if you go in and you're open with that and they feel involved, as soon as you get the camera rolling, you tend to get more energy out of them as well, and you get more passion for the project. So there's multiple things, and then also, I think the core thing particularly as a mountain biker, actually from the very start, was I was hugely passionate about the way my sport was captured. As an athlete and a filmmaker, when I saw my sport portrayed on mainstream media, you would see it shot in a way that didn't really work, or you see it presented in a way with like some kind of heavy metal music or something that was just like, okay, this extreme sport, and we're just like, no, that's not what it's about. And I think I wanted to take that into my filmmaking, but I think as you go into work with different sports and different athletes, they have those similar feelings. So they have if you're working with a gymnast will have an opinion on how they're captured, and their action and their movement and the way it's captured on film. So yeah, it's just about, acknowledging all that knowledge that an athlete has and passion for what they're doing. So, and kind of using that in building a creative vision and building the output for any kind of creative campaign marketing,
So looking at what you've done, listening to what you're saying about the creative process that takes place between your team, the athlete, and the brand, it sounds like from your work with Danny allowed you to really understand the nuances of how to portray a sport and how to involve the athlete.
I think actually, strangely in many ways, I think that one of the biggest learnings was seeing how badly it was done at times as well, because I would be so close to Danny, we worked so closely together, that when external parties came in, and whether it was like advertising or pitches or agencies or people wanted to use Danny and what they were doing, you kind of saw a lot of it going like, this is how other people are doing, like approaching working with an athlete like that.
Right.
And I think it was also quite a learning of like how, whether it was how it was done wrong or the opportunity to take it and do it right, But it wasn't any more than that at that point, I would say. It was just, again, it was like, okay, there's the next thing that I think I can do and seems like the right decision to make. So, yeah, and I just sort of pursued that.
So you obviously wanted to find a way to make it profitable and use that already in the connections and open up to create content for other brands and businesses that wanted to bring their brands to life, really. So there is growing pains. It seems like there would be growing pains from any business, as any startup. There is difficulties of getting through, whether that is raising funds, whether that is getting the right team around you. What were the challenges that you have faced through that?
Yes, I mean, I think, funnily enough, looking back, I think in those early years, it didn't feel, I guess growing pains didn't feel like pains. They felt like just hurdles that you kind of had to kind of overcome. And also, often it was kind of fear as opposed to like a pain. It was okay. Kind of going, particularly on the investment side, like I never raised investment. I never took investment. I never have done. The growth of Cut Media has been kind of fully organic. And I think at that point, it was like the pain sort of came from like, okay, I remember buying 2 cameras, I bought 2 brand new HD cameras, for me. And then my colleague Scott, was a guy called Scott Marshall, was someone who had worked with a lot as a freelancer. And then after I'd done Imaginate, during the process of Imaginate, actually, I had some work on as my own work, and then Imaginate happened. Yeah. And basically I was like, Scott, can you look after this work whilst I'm doing Imaginate in many ways? So he ended up becoming, as Cut Media was born, he became sort of the first employee, and he was the first full-time employee and became my business partner. So the two of us teamed up quite quickly and started working together on various projects. And I think the hurdles were like, okay, like we're going to buy 2 brand new cameras. That feels like a lot of money. Are we going to be able to pay that off? And the same with, for me, the biggest step early on was the 2 of us when we hired our first production manager, because that was the point where it was like, it felt like the first people who worked with Scott, it was like, okay, we're both hiring kind of the hiring process, hiring an employee that we're responsible for. And it was scary, but at the same time, it was also suddenly we realized, well, we both really enjoyed doing this creative side and the filmmaking and focused on working with clients and what that's going to be. And then we then recruited somebody who's very good at logistics, which we were both hopeless at. And you were like, whoa, we suddenly can achieve a whole lot more over here because we now aren't doing this stuff over here.
Yeah.
So there was, there's those kind of like that evolution. But it doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like you get a certain, probably once you get to like, I don't know, 5 or 6, then you start feeling like growing pains of kind of structure and how you service jobs and looking after clients. And yeah, it was probably a little later than it feels like, right? There's really, I don't know. It was so exciting. It's like that startup mentality, isn't it? It's just so exciting at the start. Yeah.
I guess that energy as a startup, both of you were really committed and passionate about it. And so that's kind of, it feels easier, the growth process. And perhaps you already had loads of connections, and your work spoke for itself. It sounds like you still have a lot of involvement in getting new clients to the business. And with this, the first question that comes to my mind is, you are meeting a client or a prospective client, and they tell, I have this great idea. I want this video to go viral. What do you tell?
I mean, if they come with the idea and they want it to go viral, I can pretty quickly tell them whether there's any chance of it going viral or not. I mean, the term viral is, we obviously get it. People talk about viral content. And I think there's so much to it, and I think in a way it's a term of the past because it's not, it's not at the same time what we talk about is, for me, the work we make, it is about organic reach, right? So the work we make and every piece of content, primarily the goal is to create organic reach. And I think I'm a believer that in a marketing context, if you make work people want to watch, it's the best approach to it. And even if you've got paid media campaign and you want to put paid media behind it, you're better making something that is organically successful and then putting paid media behind it, because what you're going to do is going to be organically successful, and then you're going to add on top of that, and it will snowball.
Exactly.
So I think in terms of the idea of viral is like, we try to kind of put that to one side, because if you break that down into what viral means, number one, it's something the audience enjoy watching. Number two, it's relatable, or it sparks some emotion in the audience that makes them comment, share, engage with it in some way. And number three, it fits the platform as well. And often to create those viral moments these days, it has to be a way that, love it or hate it, it works for the algorithm of the platform as well. So I think the viral thing at the start, to like just start with that is like, we've had it before. It's like 1 million views, and you're like, well, you can just buy 1 million views if you want 1 million views, but are they going to make any impact? I don't know. I'm not so sure. But so I think for us, we approach it with that. Okay, we want to make organic content. Here are the steps, the things that we've learned over the years that your audience will relate to. And I think that's we've got years and years and years now of like experience of understanding what audiences enjoy, understanding what they relate to, understanding how platforms have evolved and how they work on platforms. And then we bring it with a really good creative vision, and you put all that together, and then that's when, we talk about it as setting your content up for success. So it's coming with a great idea, great creative approach, hopefully like maybe a good talent as well, like crafting it in the right way, making it the right thing for the platform. And then when you release it to the world, you can also bring in those other elements of PR or paid media or whatever other kind of aspects to that campaign. But ultimately, you've done as much as you can to then make it go viral, But that's like, the term viral is, I'm not sure. I kind of have a bit of a love-hate relationship with it.
Okay. So, is this because, actually, I'm curious to explore this a bit more. Is this because of the unrealistic expectations that clients can put on you as a business, like by telling you this needs to go viral, and not really understanding what is the framework? Do you really understand your audience? Do you know how the algorithms work? Because obviously, as you rightly said, there needs to be a framework, and there needs to be a method, understanding the demographics, psychographics, all of that needs to come into play, and then you have to really invest a lot of money in the production as well. well, some of it, not necessarily all of it, needs big budgets. But what is this relationship, love-hate relationship that you have? Where does this come from?
I think it's just the term viral. In a way, just it's sort of like unhelpful. It's like, actually what you want to say is, here's a goal we're trying to achieve, which is taking our brand or a message or a product, or a relationship or some kind of like goal of a brand goal, and deliver it to an audience and spread that, and then you can go, okay, so what are the goals we're trying to achieve here? And I think it's the most important thing and the really valuable thing from a brief is like, actually, what do we want to achieve with this film or this campaign? And then that's when you start building it out. And I think, because the thing is, if your goal of a campaign is to say, in the bike context, you're like, I'm releasing a new bike and I want to tell them the intricate details of the suspension design. You're not, and then saying it's not going to go viral. No chance. Like zero chance. Like, because you might be like, oh, I want them all to know the chain stays this length. Like, you can't. So it's you've got to balance that up with what your goals as a brand are, and I think if you come into a project and you're like, okay, so we want to use this athlete, create something fun with them, build a solid link with some brand messages built in a really authentic way.
Yeah.
And then deliver that to an audience that they really connect with. That, and then you build a campaign around that, then you're starting to build a chance of it going, viral essentially, or like having a massive reach. But I think there's so many parts that come into the brief that, if you want to make a viral, and probably make a cat video, and you're going to take it off, but like it doesn't make achieve any of the goals for a brand.
Well, I asked this question because you have people that don't really understand the structures of creating an engaging video that resonates with the audience that you're trying to target, and they look at YouTube, or they look at TikTok or Instagram, and they look at these vertical form videos, and they see, how did that person achieved 1 million views? And how can we replicate this? But has there been a point where you have had to say to a client, look, let's work together on this, but your vision, your idea is not really going to work out?
I mean, undoubtedly, I think it depends on, as a company, there's so many different ways that kind of conversation comes around. I think it might be a case of, here's a brief, here's a creative idea, here's the thing we want to make, and we might go, we're probably the wrong people to do that. It's not the right thing for us. Maybe work with somebody else, or we're not the person who's going to make that happen. And that, you could say that because you don't fundamentally believe you're the best people to do the job, and you don't think you're going to achieve what they want to achieve. At the same time, you might go, well, this is great, and if we evolve it, which is probably the process we happen more often than anything, is that I'm a big believer in the evolution of the creative. And I think for me, the most, like any project we make, the most important part is the time leading up to, like, essentially hitting record on a camera. So
interesting.
The more that idea evolves, and there's good people involved in the collaboration and the back and forward, and people who can really challenge each other on it, of what we're trying to achieve, and B, what makes it good, and is the thing that actually makes the project in the end really good. Our creative director here, Andy, he has this like saying, he talks about yes and, and he talks about, okay, so that's the idea, yes, and then what, yes, and what, and and how do you make it better, make it better, make it better, and the more you can do that process before you record, and then as soon as you're actually into the production, generally we go into productions now and we know that vision, we know what we're trying to achieve. And yes, there's variables on the shoot, and we might cover different options. But essentially we're very, very well planned, and both us and our client have a really clear vision for what that output is going to be. So,
I mean, I guess it also speaks to the creative process. Creative process is something that is fluid, and it can be a singular person doing it, can also be a multitude of people doing it. And it's all about having, like the case of your creative director, being the kind of the devil advocate and like, okay, what happens if we do this, and why do we have to go this way? So it sounds like there is a healthy dose of challenging the idea and to make it better every time. And I'm curious to find out, since we are speaking about the creative aspect, how would you define creativity?
That's a big question. How would I define creativity? How would I define it? It's so many things. It's hard. Yeah, I don't know if I could like define it into one thing. I think it's because I think the thing is actually, I see creativity. The team we have here, we have the creativity in so many ways, and that it literally can be like, our producers. Actually, we talk about creativity with a budget, because we talk about actually, it's so easy to sometimes go, well, this thing doesn't suit this budget. But then actually, if we make, we try to be creative with it and think of different ways to approach what a set might look like, what props we use, what, location, where we, like, you can be creative in that,
of course, with limitations.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think, it's creativity is almost, it can be just pure like ideas and innovation and imagination and stuff, but it can also just be like coming at something from a different angle and thinking about it in a different way. So I'm not sure I could sum it up in one.
Being very practical about finding a solution to a limitation, because that's in a way that's kind of that defines a lot of great ideas. Is just you have a constraint and you have to find a solution for it, and you really have to think outside the box to come up with a solution to that problem.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest messages we've tried to like embrace as a team here, is that it's not the output of what we make is not solely based. The success of it isn't solely based on big budget or having a specific talent or having a specific thing. It's like when we talk about those limitations and those boundaries that we put on a project, actually sometimes it can really enhance it. For example, if a brief is really tight, and sometimes we like a really tight brief of like, and that can be from the budget point of view, you can only work with this person or these, this location, and sometimes that is really what forces the creativity. Is, I think in my experience, almost not the worst scenario, but it is one of the worst scenarios, is someone comes in, blank canvas, do what you want, because then it's just like, well, where do we start with this?
Yeah.
And I think for the best example we have is in terms of the work we've created and been involved with was during the pandemic. We were working with Santa Cruz Bicycles on a launch of their 5010, which is a kind of short travel mountain bike. That's it's quite a playful bike. It's very it's at that point, it's 27-inch wheels. It's like short travel. A lot of their athletes use it, but they use it for just like messing about, playing on dirt jumps, kind of street riding, and just on the trails as well, and use it for all different sort of things. But anyway, they approached us, and we were just at the point of kind of pulling the trigger on doing a road trip to Greece with a bunch of their athletes when the pandemic hit and it locked down. And it was suddenly like, right, so we've got to launch this bike. We can't travel. We can't access many of the athletes, maybe one of them in the UK, but we couldn't access any of the athletes. What can we do? And we ended up getting a miniature version of the bike made, a little toy Santa Cruz 5010. And we work with them and their team there, and basically just end up coming up with this concept of shooting a video of a toy bike with just a hand playing with it. And I mentioned Andy, our creative director, earlier on. It was shot in his parents' back garden in Glasgow with a toy bike, and it went on to be the most successful thing we've ever made for Santa Cruz, and their most successful piece of YouTube content.
Brilliant. Wow.
And it would never have happened without basically having those massive limitations on the project and forcing you to think in a different way. So yeah, I mean, it's powerful. It's kind of more
very interesting. Yeah, it just goes to show that constraints kind of create the groundwork for great ideas, great executions, because you're limited in what you can do. So you think of outside the box, really. I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing that for a launch of a new bike, that probably hasn't been done before. that was probably the first time that the launch of a new bike was done like that. So yeah, kudos to you.
Yeah, cheers. Yeah, no, it was good. It was such a cool project to be involved with that time, particularly because it was such a difficult time for everyone.
Of course.
And nobody knew what was going on at the start of the pandemic.
Very good. So, Stu, I ask this question to all of our guests that come on the podcast because it kind of really encapsulates the conversations we have. And the question that I want to ask you is this: what does success look like to you?
To me, it's really quite simple. Actually, for me personally, the link between success and contentment is the same, is very, very strong. So I feel like success to me is being content. And I think that, yes, it can be achieving things and achieving goals and everything, but it can also be like enjoying it and, enjoying the process and, enjoying what you're doing. I think sometimes people look at success as too much of a, thing up there that they're trying to achieve. And when they get there, it's going to make the whole world great. And I think, like, for me, it's like every day is a success if you're content and you're enjoying it and your life's in you're enjoying kind of life, and that's both inside, outside of work as well.
Yeah, I think that will ring true to many people listening, because it's really about grounding yourself, I believe, in knowing that you're happy with the small things in the work that you're doing, in the life, in your family. So we come to the point of the podcast where I started this tradition where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. And I think the question that was left for you is quite apt. So the question is this: how have you identified powerful guides and mentors in your career?
How I've identified them? Wow. I've been very fortunate in that. I think particularly in the early days of growing my company, there was a few people that just, I don't know, with good judgment or fortune kind of came into my life, which I think really, really helped me with mentoring and knowledge. But I think that for me, the way, I think obviously you identify if they've got experience in what you're doing and they have a base of knowledge that is valuable to you and everything. But for me, the way to identify them is if they're passionate about what you're doing. I think that's the thing where I feel like I was very fortunate in that I've had a few people in my journey who have just, I don't know whether it's seen something in me or been passionate about what I was doing and been excited about what I was trying to achieve. But I think they've shown a passion in it, which has been just like a privilege to kind of have, because they've shown a passion in me, which is like just led them, and then they've got an expertise which has just led them to kind of be a great mentor and build a great relationship. And I think for me, the thing, certainly with finding a mentor is like, if they show a passion for either you personally or what you're trying to achieve, I think that's really where it's like, something special happens.
That's the crux of the matter, of finding someone, or through the work that you're doing, through the connections that you have, that someone sees there is potential in you and they want to like take you under their wing or give you some advice. So it sounds like kind of through the work that you've been doing, the connections that you establish throughout your career, these people kind of came to your life and it sounds like you grabbed the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I think I did. I grabbed the opportunity, and there's some people who, it very naturally, they just became a mentor. I think that the thing I would say is laterally as well, though, if you see someone who you feel can be a mentor for you, don't be ashamed to ask, because I think it's sometimes people don't always come forward. And I think it's sometimes when you ask someone, sometimes it catches them off guard and they're like, oh, really? You want me to help? And then they get really invested in what you're doing and they're excited about it. So I think that is the other part of it. It's like, I was fortunate, particularly early on, that people just naturally came into my life who I think were really great mentors. But I think laterally as well, I think there's a few people I've seen, I was like, would you help me here? I think it's quite it's flattering when people are asked, but I think they don't always think, they won't always come forward. So I think it's also worth it. And if you see someone like that, just be open and ask.
For sure. I mean, especially at sometimes as mentorship it's not necessarily a structure to it. It's not necessarily a formal program that you can follow. There might be, but I'm generalizing here. But more often than not, it comes down to you as a person to identify a couple of people that you think, oh, I really like them. I can see them helping them out, and then this is what I can bring to them as well. So it kind of is really, from my experience, is you have to give and you have to be given. So it's a kind of, it has to benefit some way both parties.
Yeah, for sure.
Very good. Stu, it has been a pleasure talking with you and really understanding a bit more about how you've done it, the story behind Cut Media, and how you have really kind of grew exponentially in your work from 2012 to now. You just really, wow, how is this possible? But it seems that you are constantly, pushing yourself.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And I would definitely be doing myself or doing other people an injustice, I think, if I didn't. It's definitely as much as I'm playing a role, I'm surrounded by a pretty incredible team who are crafting that work, and and as we've grown, I think there's definitely some amazing skill sets within Cut Media that they're bringing that to life. So I'm very lucky to be surrounded by an amazing team.
That brings us to the end of this insightful episode with Stu Thomson on the right success. Now, I have a huge favor to ask you before you go. From looking at the analytics, 70% of you that listen to the podcast do not follow it. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to the podcast. It really helps us grow and bring more inspiring guests like Stu to the show. Be sure to follow us on social media for updates and for more exciting episodes. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, keep pushing your own boundaries and write your own success. See you next week.